Protesters. Military forces of Colombia. The 2021 Colombian protests are a series of ongoing protests in Colombia that began on the 28th of April 2021 against increased taxes and healthcare reform proposed by the government of President of Colombia Iván Duque Márquez. The tax initiative was introduced to expand funding to Ingreso Solidario, a universal basic income social program established in April 2020 to provide relief during the COVID-19 pandemic in Colombia. While the legislative Bill 010 proposed the privatization of healthcare in Colombia. While the courts had anticipated the protests would be widespread, and as a result had annulled all existing permits out of fear of further spread of COVID-19. The protests began in earnest on the 28th of April. In large cities such as Bogotá and Cali, thousands to tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets, in some cases clashing with authorities, resulting in at least 6 deaths. Protests continued to grow over the coming days, and amidst promises by the president to rework his tax plan, they reached a peak on the 1st of May, International Workers' Day. On the 2nd of May, President Duque declared that he would fully withdraw his new tax plan, though no new concrete plans were announced, and protests continued. The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights and Human Rights Watch noted abuses by police against protesters, while former President Álvaro Uribe Vélez called on the people to show solidarity with police and soldiers. In April 2021, President Iván Duque proposed increased taxes at a time when the COVID-19 pandemic in Colombia was beginning to worsen as various healthcare systems were failing throughout the country. Ingreso Solidario, a universal basic income social program introduced by the Duque government during the pandemic, had already provided at the time 13 monthly payments of around $43 USD to low-income populations. Since April 2020, 3 million of about 50 million Colombians were eligible for Ingreso Solidario payments, with the program being at a smaller scale when compared to other Latin American countries. According to Mareike Blofeld, director of the German Institute for Global and Area Studies Latin American Division, compared to other countries in the region, the coverage that Ingreso Solidario offers is extremely weak. For the 3 million people that got it, it certainly made a difference, but there were 5 times as many households that needed it. The Duque government, seeking to expand the program to include 1.7 million more people and to establish a permanent basic income program, chose to pursue a tax reform for funding. The tax increase on many Colombians was presented as a way to provide $4.8 billion United States dollars for Ingreso Solidario. Duque's tax reforms included the expansion of value-added taxes on more products such as food and utilities, the addition of some middle-class earners into a higher tax bracket, and the removal of various income tax exemptions. A controversial legislative bill, Bill 010, proposed to reform healthcare in Colombia by making the system more privatized. Plans to drastically change Colombia's healthcare system amid the pandemic as well as the method. The bill was filed through a special committee in the House of Representatives that did not require congressional debate, also fueled discontent among Colombians. Colombians simultaneously experiencing the third highest number of COVID-19 deaths in Latin America, the worst economic performance in 50 years, with a gross domestic product decreasing 6.8% in 2020 and an unemployment rate of 14%, were angered by the proposed tax increase and organized a national labor strike similar to the 2019 protests. In addition to the tax and healthcare reforms, strike organizers demanded a universal basic income at the nation's minimum wage level, additional support for small businesses, and the ban on using glyphosate-based herbicides, including other requests. In preparation for protests, Judge Nelly Yolanda Villamizada Penrinda of the Administrative Court of Cundinamarca ruled on 27 April that permits to demonstrate in cities across the country be annulled, banning public demonstrations due to health risks related to COVID-19. Disgruntled citizens, however, ignored the public bans on protests. Tens of thousands of protesters began demonstrating on the 28th of April 2021. With strong protests occurring in Cali where the statue of Spanish conquistador Sebastián de Belalcázar was torn down for a second time by MISIC protesters. In Bogotá, tens of thousands protested and clashes with authorities began later in the day, with 4,000 protesters maintaining their activities throughout the night. 2 were killed on the first day of protests. Police presence increased on the 29th of April, when General Elisa Camacho of the Metropolitan Police of Bogotá announced that 5,800 police would be deployed during the demonstrations. Some Transmilenio stations were also